Hi everyone, this is Dating While Black, and this episode is Dating While Black and Queer. We have our 5 guests today, and we'll be unpacking a lot of the issues of the LGBTQ community and its intersection with Blackness. My first question for you all is, how would you define queer?
So when at first I would just be like, with talking with friends, I would just say I'm gay. And then 2019, 2020 happened, and then the word was queer. And when I first started understanding the word, I just knew it to be different, and I just thought queer was synonymous with non-straight. You're just not straight. It doesn't matter where you are on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, you're just not straight, and you can fall into different categories. So you can be queer and bi, you can be queer and lesbian, you can be queer and gay, you can be queer and trans. But when you say queer, it's part of that community, and it's not part of the cishet community.
I really agree. I sort of approach the term queer as an umbrella term, and that's just based on my own experience with different words within the community, and that might just be regional, but I am more comfortable identifying as queer than I am identifying as lesbian. But that's not to say that I'm not a lesbian, but it's just I have a sort of discomfort with the word just based on how I guess cis people have used it against me in the past. And so then I've just sort of taken on queer to represent my sexuality, even though it also can include gender as well.
How would you all define non-binary?
I feel like the definition for me, it's just I don't know, it's in the word, existing outside of the gender binary, in which the how you identify cannot be conceived through these very gendered norms. But also I feel for me, these gender norms also stem from whiteness traditionally. So removing yourself back, I feel the way I think about it, it's specifically it's people of color, Black people, connecting back to our ancestors, since this type of gender norm did not exist when we were in Africa, or if you have indigenous lineage, did not exist pre-colonization. So I feel connecting back to ourselves in a way that kind of tries to push off these boundaries of expression and acceptance.
I'm not non-binary, so I don't want to say what it could mean. But I know from my understanding with someone, if I'm speaking to someone they identify as non-binary, I just hear that they don't solely identify with more or less masculine or feminine traits, whereas someone who's queer identifying femme identifies as a femme for a reason, because maybe they more so identify with their traditionally feminine traits, versus someone who maybe is non-binary, goes by they, them, is more leaning as maybe, let's say they're bisex female, but presenting themselves would be to everyone in the world societal norm masculine or masculine presenting, but they don't identify regardless of how they may how look to the outside world, because to them it's not a black or white, it's in the shades of gray. And I think it's a beautiful thing to also be able to have less duality, and to expand more in your masculine and feminine traits, because those aren't binary either. So.
I sort of approach my non-binary identity as moving in and out, and also helping my masculine and feminine side coexist, sort of. And I guess I sort of think about it a lot based on memory. I'm not sure if this is going to be cohesive, but I'm going to try. I feel I did have I had a girl childhood, but I did have a boyhood, without even recognizing that that's what I was having. There were times when, I I approached myself as if I was a little boy, or as if I was, you know, like I don't know. I don't really, gender, I really don't know. I define my non-binary identity as like including everything, but also kind of like Iris said, existing without the expectations, I guess. So I guess maybe it's just, maybe like the way I approach it identifies more with like a fluid sort of word, you know, like I don't know what the actual term would be. I don't know if non-binary is the actual term, because like we said, like these definitions vary based on location, region, all of those things.
Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because the point that I wanted to bring up was that for someone like me, I don't identify as non-binary, but I do identify as gender fluid. And I've actually gotten, you know, a fair share like criticism online because of that identity and how it may kind of conflict with the non-binary identity. The term non-binary is it's been so I guess kind of weaponized in ways that it really shouldn't, or ways that it was never meant to be, as like it's trans versus non-binary, as opposed to like there has to be someone putting the other person down or not part of the community. But that, I digress. But the thing for me is that non-binary has always just been this kind of response to colonialism, response to, you know, imperial structures, and this, like to religion itself, and to all these different structures that were put upon people. It is harking back to the more indigenous, more first, you know, century cultures, and that's beautiful in itself. And another part is just like this, there's something beautiful to it where it gets politicized, but it's beautiful sans political backing, if that makes sense.
And one thing I want to take note of is Iris's point on, like, historically speaking, like this has always been a part of Blackness and the history of Blackness. And my next question for you all is, how does your queer identity intersect with Blackness for you as an individual?
So for me, it's really interesting because one part of me is this very, you know, gender fluid individual that I love to kind of play with how I present myself, with like, you know, the way I talk is non-threatening. Like, you know, I very much come off in a way that's very not traditional for someone of my identity, as you know, as like a almost 200-pound Black man. In the city of Chicago. So it's very interesting to see how just two like strangers, how those two conflict, and how those two kind of coincide with how people meet me and how they choose to interact with me. Are they kind of turned off at first, and then they realize, okay, they're non-threatening, or is it vice versa? What's happening there? So to strangers, it's very weird to kind of see how that plays out. And then just, you know, within like, you know, my chosen family, my blood family, those relationships, there's definitely ways where, you know, I felt conflicted with like traditional values and more like my own personal expression. And also where I felt, you know, kind of embraced in ways that I didn't see, or understanding how my queerness is shaped by my Blackness. And so that's been beautiful.
Like I said before, I am new to the LGBTQ community, but I'm not new to being Black. And so, you know, it's kind of like I was Black before, you know, straight, but people still like looked at me a certain way, you know, of course, because you're African American or, you know, a person of color. But now, especially like, you know, now that I'm, you know, in the community, you know, like officially, I can officially call myself like a bisexual woman. And, you know, I walk around with my girlfriend by my side. It's very tough to combine the two. You know, we're already like at the bottom of the totem pole as far as like social, you know, social interactions. And so now, in addition to being Black, now we're gay. So it's really, I know for me, it's been really tough to like already start off at the bottom and then like seemingly like become like lower, and it's kind of, it's really sad. But I definitely have seen a huge difference in like how people look at me, especially when I'm outwardly like being gay and I'm Black.
It feels like a secondary identity almost. You know, like if you're Black before you're anything else, and then you're a woman next, and then you're gay. So it kind of feels like it falls under categories of like how people see me. Like when they first see me, they see a Black woman, and then they see, but then they see a Black person, then a Black woman, and then you won't know because I'm femme presenting, so most people think I'm just cishet. So I don't necessarily get questioned or looked at unless I'm having PDA with a partner or my friend group, or I'm like, you're coming out somehow. So it's not really something, it's not an identity I walk around with. But I think there's, when it comes to how it intersects with my Blackness, I feel that a lot of gay white men mimic Black women. And so I see my personality like dramatize on gay white men. So how people expect gay white men to be isn't how they expect gay Black women to be. If anything, they expect us to be like really like non-femme or whatever the case may be. Like it's like, oh, if you look like a girl, why are you with someone who's a girl? So it becomes a lot of that, and the homophobia in the Black community goes into like how it's just not productive to be gay for some reason, as if it's like a job, like as if you sign up for something like, I'm gonna be gay this year. Yeah, because that's what's helping the Black community. So I think it comes with a lot of that resentment towards the white LGBTQ community, because that's like a whole separate community. That's like their own thing. Like, you know, and then being Black and gay is like its own other thing. So, you know.
Me personally, I think that the intersection of both is beautiful. Thinking about culture, like I'm from Chicago, like house music was created by Black people, but it was specifically created like by Black queer people. Like thinking about like ball culture, like that was like, that is us, and like that is our culture, and like so many different things. Even thinking about like Audre Lorde and Bayard Ruffin, like all of these like Black, like prolific Black figures like are come from us. And despite like white straight communities, white gay communities, Black straight like traditional communities, like we're still here, like we're still striving despite the fact that like the AIDS epidemic like tried to cripple us, like we're still here. And I think that's very like a testament to us and like our strength and our ability to overcome a lot. And I feel like because of the intersection, like we create something that is even more beautiful. Like I think about like, since I do go to Wellesley, like there's a large queer population, and how like within that, a lot of people talk about like butch femme, whatever, but it's like, that's not us. Like, yes, that might be like similar, but like, no, like we have something totally different than that. So it's like, for me, it's just like embracing the difference as a badge of honor, despite what other people might believe us, like what other people's perceptions and projection onto you is not your own, because if you know yourself, you know how to navigate the world as yourself.
I think that's actually a very interesting point. The biggest thing being that a lot of, especially Black trans women, Black trans femme, just Black individuals in general, I would go as far to say, Black and brown individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. It is kind of interesting to see how like, you know, we respond to seeing so much of our culture and so much that is rooted in starting with us being co-opted by white individuals, usually white cis men. And I know, like for me, because I only speak to my experience, like it's been so it's so weird to kind of see like things that like I kind of grew up around hearing from like Black women, or that I kind of see now characterized, like made into a caricature, or almost like blown out of proportion to something that like it's almost like you're making fun of like the Black women that raised me. So it's just, to me, it makes my skin crawl. I don't know if others may agree with that, but just putting it out there.
I love what both of you said. It absolutely makes my skin crawl, especially when it's weaponized against you. You know, like I've had white people from the LGBT community weaponize AAV against me. And I'm like, what is going on? Like this, it's so violent and it's so public if it's like on a Twitter platform or, you know, on Instagram or something like that. But I also really love what Iris said about sort of like wearing that difference as like a medal of honor in a way, or like I might have messed up the wording there. And like when you say that, like I think about Essex Hemphel's Brother to Brother, or Nikki Giovanni, Marlon Riggs, and like how they've embraced the difference in their art, and have like purposefully documented that experience and those questions for us, to look back on, I guess. And I agree that that's a beautiful thing too. And I guess I would hope that like we're doing the same thing, because like, you know, we can all hope for, well, some of us can hope for like abolition in our lifetime, but like who's to really know if that's going to happen. But moving forward, what can we do now to make it easier on the next generation? And I'm just like so thankful for all of the people who have come before us and left evidence of their work and of that struggle, and what they've learned from it.
I'm happy you guys brought up like the beauty of it, and like I think when I first heard the question, what's the intersection, I was like, oh, the pain of it, like the pain of being Black and gay, because both are ridiculed in very separate ways, and together just made me think of like just the trauma that comes with coming out, or people seeing you in public, or being a conversation. But after my coming out to myself, because I think coming out is more to yourself after a while, you like accepting it and surrendering to yourself, I feel like my queerness deepened my Blackness and made me more intimate with my Blackness. Like experiencing Black women and experiencing Black men gave me a deeper appreciation for my Blackness and a deeper intimacy with myself in being Black. Because like I said, the white gay community is different. They do make fun of the Black women we grew up seeing raising us. How they express their joy to them is how they think is a trait or a caricature, when Black joy is like worn like a sweater in the queer community. Like, oh yes, like no, that's our joy, but you think that's like something cute to say on Instagram or something like that. So being queer definitely has made me more compassionate, and more graceful in my Blackness. It's like you say, you wear like a medal of honor, like, yes, I'm Black and I'm queer and I can hold love for all of that, more than most can say, because their reservoirs aren't full. Because when you're queer, that's a lot of surrendering you have to do to a lot of things.
And my next question for you guys would be, what have been the greatest struggles you guys have noticed with dating while Black and queer?
Being over-sexualized by cishet people as a bisexual femme-presenting woman. Like, it's either you want to have a threesome, it's either like they want to ask questions, you're used as a soundboard system. Like, I don't know, you're either everyone's stylist, you're either everyone's makeup artist, you're everyone's, whatever people think gay is, you're supposed to be that. Or as soon as they find out you're gay, I know someone who's gay and you'll like them. It's like, that's not how it works. Like, it's just, but definitely the over-sexualization by homophobic people. Like, I had a guy, it's like, oh, like, would you have a threesome with me? And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And then he was like, oh yeah, but you know, the alphabet community. And I was just like, how is it that you claim to be an ally, you claim to like love women, but as soon as it's man to man, it's alphabet community a detriment to the Black community, a detriment to this. Now it's a problem, but you want to over sexualize queer woman, and I think that just goes into like being queer and woman. But I don't. That's on a whole nother spectrum.
I just want to kind of go off that a little bit and say, I think one of the biggest problems that I have faced is people assuming that because of my identities that I am like, it's a privilege for me to like, for them to like date, like, I guess kind of like there's like this kind of like separation between me and my partners where like I'm constantly reaching up, usually, and with that so much being with my non-black partners, but that I'm kind of like I should be so lucky to be with them in their spaces, and kind of like almost that I have to serve a purpose, or I kind of have to, you know, tap dance every 10 minutes to like kind of earn my spot at like the table that, you know, my black queer ancestors basically created. But you know, that's whatever. But it's just especially like for someone like me who like I said before, I've dated a lot of white people. I've felt a lot of times that, you know, that I am not valued for my full identities, and or like for my full presentation of who I am, and that so much of it has to be kind of stifled and for me to kind of like please the other person in my life, or to almost kind of like my idea of like a relationship has been, you know, me sacrificing so much to give into them, as and not understanding that yes, my identities in this weird sociological construct fall towards the bottom of the list, but that doesn't mean that I am any less of a person, or you know that I'm not a human being or stuff like that. So it's good to like be finding that now, you know, at 23, but learning lessons.
PDA, especially when you're in a crowd of old people, like older generation, they tend to like just stare at you in the most negative way, and it's heartbreaking. It makes you feel like, at least for me, it makes me feel like the world is gonna end. Like if I hold hands, like, you know, when I'm at home, I'm comfortable.
It's been like that homophobia within the Black community. Like for me personally, like my mom is Black American, but my dad's Nigerian. So I feel like kind of like the same situation. Like I'm out to my mom, but my mom will still kind of say kind of like homophobic-ish type things. I try to excuse it because like people can be like not knowing and ignorant, but like sometimes like with my dad's side, it's like I'm not out to them at all because they're like very like Nigerian, evangelical Christian, live in Houston, the South, like all of those things, which I feel like it's kind of like the thing that's like, why even try if you already know the outcome of like what's gonna be like, it know it's not gonna be good. On the other flip side of like a whole another situation, I feel kind of like it's a blessing in disguise. I feel like going to historically women's college allows you to explore your sexuality without judgment. Like no one really cares, but I feel like as Black people, we're kind of always trying to be put into different boxes. Like, oh, like if you're more masculine presenting, like, oh, that means you must be like a stud, or if like you're more feminine, like you must be a femme. And it's like if you're a femme, that means like you have to be like non-aggressive, or like if you're like masculine, you can't be like delicate or any ways possible. And I just feel like that type of like rigid type of you must be this because I look at you and I assign this is very harmful for us, because like no one is one thing at all times, and if you are, that's like a problem because human beings were so multifaceted. So I feel like those types of rigid type of boxes that are placed on us can be harmful. It's not even the identity themselves, like studs amazing, femmes amazing, androgynous people amazing, but it's the fact that like people assigning us even like behavior traits just based off of how you look is like super problematic to me, and it doesn't create anything like I feel like that's going to be helpful for us as a community.
I kind of want to like have a follow-up question to that, like for everyone else, because it's something that I've been speaking to my other queer friends about, if that's okay, Kat, about the whole masculine feminine thing of women and men. Um, I've been told that like how I approach women, I'm the nigga in the relationship. Like I'm the one that's like paying for the dates or pursuing or more of the aggressor or the pursuer. But I don't feel that way myself. You know what I mean? But I get told that even though like I probably look like girly or whatever. And I find that within dynamics dating, we still try to do cis het dynamics. Like someone has to be the guy or someone has to be the girl and someone has to do more and someone has to chase less. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I feel like it's destroyed a lot of my femme relationships or just my queer relationships in general, because I've been with trans people, I've been with everyone, and I still catch myself falling into a dynamic, trying to make a cishet dynamic with non-cishet people, all even within myself. Like I'm trying to fit a mold. I don't know if you guys struggle with that too.
Me, that I've been seeing that more and more recently, like within like I guess like the lesbian community, stemming from oh no, like top and like bottom dynamics, which is like, yo, whatever you do in the bedroom does not have to, like, the positioning doesn't have to transfer to like your actual relationship if you don't want it to. Like just because you might be the one that's quote unquote more passive, like that doesn't mean you have to be that outside and like dating people. And I feel like that type of enforcement of constantly like, oh, like this person, like, oh, they look like this, they're a top, whatever, this person's a bottom, like it just creates more hierarchies within like relationships that don't need to have hierarchies at all. And it's like, of course, like whatever you like, the sexual position you like is like what you like, but it just doesn't have to extend to personalities if you don't want it to be. I know some relationships, like people who are more dominant or like the top like to be more dominant like outside in the relationship, and like that's perfectly fine. But I feel like it shouldn't just be like an assumption that that's what you do. And I feel like, at least in my experience at my school, because it's a lot of like baby gays, like people just coming out for the first time, like they try to, I feel like, extend that type of rigidity to like their first relationships a lot, just because they don't know, which is like, hey, like just because you used to date like guys a lot, now you date like women and non-binary people a lot, that doesn't mean you have to transfer like you don't have to transfer like the same type of roles, because it's kind of the point of not dating them, is to not have those types of same type of roles and assumptions.
I actually have a follow-up question for y'all about this topic. How do you guys work against heteronormativity within your relationships? How do you like kind of abolish those internalized ideas that are kind of being pushed upon you? Because even like Mina said, I mean, I've heard multiple people ask queer couples which one's the guy, which one's the girl, which is a problem within itself. But I'm curious to know how y'all abolish those ideas in that rhetoric, because it's so readily available.
Communication. Yeah, I'm gonna let Ryan go, but yeah.
Yeah, it's all just understanding that 9 out of 10 problems in the world are the result of colonialism. This is not saved from that. I know what I like to understand is that for some people, working within those dynamics is actually very beneficial. You know, some people, that's all they know. They may be very comfortable with this very, man woman dynamic, like, and if that's you, that's you. For me, I spit on that idea. I have found comfort in my own exploring of the duality of masculine and feminine, so that's why I try to make room for that with other people, and whoever my partner is, or partners maybe, that that we are comfortable with exploring those dynamics and seeing what works best for us, and understanding that beyond what our labels are, that we are human beings, we're fallible, and that we require time and everything to just kind of figure out what works for us.
But I feel like checking yourself is like the key to life. I didn't realize how misogynistic I was, or how much internalized misogynoir I had until I dated another Black woman, and how I tried to recreate trauma, whether it was like how growing up maybe being coerced into sex or being manipulated in certain ways, that I was putting those things that I've had other men, because I thought I was straight growing up or whatever the case may be, having what men do to me put onto another woman. So you know how you hear like guys get hurt in third grade and then they're like trying to get back at every girl since? I felt that I was at some point creating that dynamic. Like if I was recreating my pain into that person, and I was like, wow, I don't respect women as much as I thought I did. Like, wow, like you never, like, loving women teaches you how much you hate yourself in so many ways. So like loving another woman was like, wow, I don't like that way about me. Like she wanted to be poly, and then I had like a whole slut shaming thing going back and forth between us, and then I didn't realize I took that on from men and other cishet relationship dynamics. So I started to check myself, if like, how am I homophobic as a queer person? How am I misogynistic as a femme to femme relationship? How am I misogynistic when I'm dating another Black woman? I'm like being just as whatever as someone else may be. And then how much of that is in myself, that I probably am homophobic to myself and maybe hate myself in certain ways as a woman because of like cis patriarchal capitalistic bullshit and whatever. 9 times out of 10 it's that. Um, but if you work on it within yourself to break down your own dynamics, so you're not taking on certain roles in your own life as a single non-dating person, you have to break down those dynamics within you before you can extend that to a relationship, because your first relationship is with you.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I just want to say, now take that dynamic and now put that with two men or two male presenting individuals, and realize that it is, I feel like I'm constantly butting heads with someone who, like, we're two like trained bulls that for all of our lives we're told, like, you're gonna see this person and you're going to knock them out, like you have no other option. And so now we're both in the same room and we're both trying to be like alpha, or whatever, alpha. And so it's like, it's so weird on how like two men will challenge each other, or at the same time we'll both just like agree to, like, okay, we'll like lower our guns, but like I'm still ready at the moment's notice to like take my role as like alpha, or as like the lower, don't know off the top of my head, is that beta, omega, it's one of those two. But it's that whole thing. And so it's so, I just found it so interesting, just understanding how, like, we take on so many things from like this white cis patriarchal structure. And so, it's very interesting to see how that plays into the roles of like Black women and Black female presenting individuals. And then when you see it played out in like on the male side, which is taught to be as the more aggressor, and how that plays off when it's two individuals that have that same, I don't know, energy, something like that.
Speaking from personal experience, like I haven't like dated anyone officially, but I feel like when it comes to like beginning like the talking stages as like more like femme on femme, there tends to be a type of passiveness, which I do think stems from type of like heteronormativity, in which like kind of like, because it's like you want like someone with like cis hetero relationships supposed to be aggressor, and that's like removed or like assumed to be removed from like queer lesbian relationships. Like there's kind of almost like, I don't be like a wall at the beginning, but kind of like no one is truly speaking their minds in some type of like fear of becoming that type of aggressor. Or like I specifically with like lesbians, like the fear of being a predator has been like so pushed in media. Like I remember like when like a couple months ago I watched freaking like The Players Club random, but it was just like how that movie enforces like the predatory queer woman is like so violent. It was just like, wow, like this is probably why so many of us are even afraid to even talk to women, because we've been seeing so many images like, if you are gay, that means you're a predator, like you're preying on people, rather than like you can engage in like relationships and be aggressive and not be a predator because it's consensual. And I feel like that is something that needs to be battled with heteronormativity, like the passive, like being passive, but also like the internalized homophobia and seeing yourself as like, oh, like I'm like either like being like I'm the woman, but it's like you're also dating another woman, like y'all are both women, and also like, oh, I can be aggressive, but this doesn't mean there's something wrong with me because you like women, so just engage with that.
How does the representation of Black queerness, particularly like Black queer love, because I feel like we don't really get to see that in media. It's always like when there is a Black queer couple, it's usually an interracial queer couple. We don't really get to see Black love and queerness. So how does representation of the Black queer identity in media influence how you approach dating, but also just view yourself?
I just want to first off say thank you to Moonlight, because that movie, it seemed like after that, like dating any person who was non-Black, they were so understanding to the fact that I now have a heart and that like and that my life is now like intersectional and like I go through bad times too, but I'm just not the same as Trevante Rhodes, but whatever. But speaking off that, it's like it's like a double-edged sword because one part of it is that we are starting to see a lot more representation of Black and brown folk in the queer community, which is beautiful, but at the same time it's like, okay, that we've had 2 years of progress to something that is now, when was the first like camera made? Like we've had so much back even before then because minstrel shows and everything. So it really like this, it's like been 200 plus years of these narratives, and so it's like we're chipping away at like this humongous iceberg, but it's beautiful to see the process happen. um as for being a queer male presenting person, that it was very, it's very interesting because like a lot of the like roles that you'll see, especially in like Black media, the Black gay guy is usually like either very predatory, but in like the silly way that like you want to see him come back on the next episode, or it's like they're in prison and like they've been deprived of the touch of a woman for 15 years and like now they just have no other thing on their mind but to rape. And it's like how weird and like obsessive like media is with like Black gay love, and like how it's not never, it never can be love, it just has to be the process of having sex. It's just weird to see like media's fascination with that but not in ever really reaching out to a Black queer person to get their perspective or even to really say like, is this something that even should be talked about? Like, does this even make sense to talk about it in this arena? Like, so yeah.
Like the representation of queerness also represents with colorism a lot too. Like I'm thinking about the show Pose, and it's I like as like Black trans people, that show has done a lot. But also like that show is very much rooted in colorism. Like I don't care what everyone else says. Like why are the lighter skinned characters viewed as good and the darker skinned one of them has died and one of them is like the comedical villain of the show. And I'm think another example is like with like lesbian relationships. I feel like the darker skinned you are, the more perceived you are as like aggressor, violent, like being like, oh, so especially if you are masculine presenting, it's like, oh, you look like a nigga, that means that you are one. And it's just like, no, that doesn't mean that. And like I feel like it erases so much nuance of like Black masculine women, Black trans men. Like it erases so much nuance, and it's just like the media, like I don't go to traditional media to represent me anymore because so many years, like what you said, like it's been how many years the camera's been invented, and it's like now we're hitting this, and this is kind of like falling flat. I feel like the media has a lot to do more, and the kind of like what you were saying about interracial relationships. Like I'm not against interracial relationships, obviously, but I do think it's kind of disheartening to see. Like I remember watching Cheryl Dunye, the Watermelon Woman. It's like a movie I think from the 80s or 90s, but it's like a very, I feel like, iconic movie featuring like a Black lesbian, but her relationship is engaging with a white woman, which is like, if that was her story, because it's I think, autobiographical, then that's good. But I think it's also harmful because it does create that still type of hierarchy between like, as like Black, like, why are we always the aggressor all the time? Like, why can't we be like the ones that's getting the traction come to? Like, why are we looking for these non-Black people to go towards? Like, or just like Black love. Like, I love seeing two Black people in love, because who wouldn't love see two Black people in love? And I think that's what I like would crave from the media, is just seeing two Black queer people in love.
A filmmaker and writing queer stories and writing from a queer femme perspective. From what I see, like from whatever, it's always interracial. Like it's always like there was a white person, and I'm just like, I never had that experience. But there's also always like either a coming out story or a coming of age, like you discover you're gay, and then like the person you want to be with, you can't. It's always like the same story. Your parents are finding out, you're finding out, the person you love is finding out, and that's it. Why can't I get a story with someone who's full-blown gay already out, and then they're just dating and like they're already finding love? Why is it always like the pain of coming out or like the pain of being gay, and it's never like a romantic comedy and they're just like dating and it's funny with two guys and these two girls or something? Or it's always hypersexualized, and once you're gay, non-monogamous, you're open, you're poly, you're fucking everyone, you're contracting something, and you're doing a lot of fuck shit. It's never like just a regular person living their regular life who just happens to be gay. It's like it's always like this phenomenon. A gay person finds love, discovers who they are, confronts their family. Like, why can't it be like this gay person like falls in love and has to like finagle their boss for their promotion, and then like all the other white bullshit stories we get every other day? It's always so like, it's just Black trauma exploitation a lot. And I think and it's always written from the view of like white people doing something to us, or like us being at the head of a riot of it's always about Stonewall, it's always about the past. So hopefully Black queer writers moving forward now, which there are a lot of us moving forward and getting our representation from ourselves, is that we're exploring, one, me is like Black queers taking their energy back in the community, and then also more just futuristic stories of like present and moving forward. Like, we're not, Stonewall's great, I'm happy we can talk about our ancestors, but like there's Black queers now who are doing great things and need representation. So hopefully the representation comes from us now moving forward, so we don't have to sit there and be like, oh, what we saw ran from some random white guy like and gave it to a Black person or something. No shade, no tea, Lena Wave or anything right now.
And going on to the topic of representation, one thing I want to unpack is the rhetoric of the gay agenda, specifically coming out of the Hotep community. So this is a quote from a official, I can't say this without laughing, an official Hotep blog's response to the releasing of Moonlight. The blog is called Hotep Nation, just so we can credit them. And they said, quote, "The gay agenda, it has been thought for decades that there is an attack on the Black community by the system to emasculate the Black male, take away his resources and leave him feminine and craving the company of another man. The theories are numerous, the evidence has piled up, and the blame game is on repeat. If you visit a Black city, you will find a parade of women accompanying their children around town to school, sporting events, and grocery stores. A massive lack of fathers and male role models in general. Old news. The seeds aren't being planted in Black men. It happens to the babies. What damage does the gay agenda idea create?" This is actually my question. So that was the quote. The question is, what damage does the gay agenda idea and rhetoric create, and how does it influence how you are perceived by potential partners?
It's absolutely true. Like, it's 110% true. Moonlight was our first attempt at, turning over this elite group of femboy African American males, and I'm proud of it. But there's this weird fascination within non-white queer, not even queer communities, just non-white communities. Usually it's the Black and brown communities where we have these ideas. We have machismo, we have this like work ethic that like comes all the way back from slavery times, which was what was put onto us by our oppressor. Just want to make that be known. Same thing with machismo, like all these like, again, colonial structures that were implanted into like all of these like places that didn't need it, that didn't need to have this gender binary. But now we have a group of like 30-year-old men with neck beards like are angry at a very successful movie because it's turning a bunch of men soft. And like because a man's not 24/7 366 actually talking about having sex with a woman that they're lesser than. Like that's the weird obsession with like sex within like male non-white communities, and actually in white communities as well, just in male communities, where it's like your masculinity has to constantly be tested, and it has to constantly be like you have to go through a yearly checklist of like how many women have you had sex with, how many times have you thought of a woman, how many women have you made a pass at. It's all these aggressive actively seeking someone, which like A is just predatory in nature, and B it's like let men be feminine. Like there are so many, we're definitely seeing, especially on like TikTok and apps like that, like you're seeing so many beautiful, soft young men who are understanding that their gender and their gender expression doesn't have to align to these principles that were forced onto us by people other than that did not look like us. So that's what I gotta say on that.
Well, like Hoteps have brain damage, so prefacing that. The thing about like Hotep people, like they believe in Black nationalism, and like any nationalism and this type of idea of building like the Black state, it's always going to be a type of hierarchy, like, which is terrible because you're thinking, right, that they're anti-racist, that they want to destroy these hierarchies, but it's actually they just want Black straight men at the top of the hierarchy and everyone else below them. And within that, they target homophobia as this type of like disease on Black people, as in like this is what's stopping like forget racism, forget fucking capitalist colonialism. These gay Black people, this is what's like stopping us from being like our best selves. Obviously is not true. I wish that they targeted actual systems of oppression for liberation. Also, it's like if any of them examined themselves, they would realize how much their own internalized homophobia and masculinity is harming themselves, like harming their emotional selves, which they tend to not even address. I feel like this type of gay agenda is just it's so harmful, and it's like so many people believe it, which is crazy. Not like our generation or like majority of our generation, but I see like people like my mom's age believing this, and it's so terrible and just harmful to Black queer people. And with masculine Black men, aren't Black men hyper masculine? Like, if anything, would we not want to decrease the amount of like masculinity that's on Black men that's harming them from the outside world and internally harming them? I just never understand the thought process of them. Like, is there cognitive dissonance? Is it mental illness? Like, I'm confused. What is in your brain? Because it never makes any sense.
Like, I'm with you. I'm sitting here like trying to like piece it together, and like because the whole idea is like, oh, homosexuality is destroying the Black family, it's destroying the Black man. I'm like, so are girls not gay? But then you guys want like 5 wives, right? So like I'm like, really? So I'm like, okay, like where are we going with this really? So it's like the Black man deserves to have as many wives and to provide for them, but then it's like no homophobia, but you're supposed to just be in bed with 5 bitches. Like what? Like, okay. And then also, if the whole Hotep thing is going back to our ancestral roots, which is more caught up in like Egyptian shit than it is in like actual other West African, East African, South, all the other anyways, it was a matriarch. And so I'm like looking at it and I'm like, if anything, y'all need to come down 10 notches and put women on top and put non-binary, gender fluid, intersex, queer people next to that. And then y'all kind of just are there. Like, I don't know where they think they are in the actual hierarchy that they're perpetuating, because last time I checked, it was matriarchal, and then men protect the woman, and then they just protect everyone as if, and then it goes back to just Black men being raped and beaten into submission, where, you know, white slave masters would literally rape and embarrass the Black men in front of their families, their wives, so as if homosexuality isn't an embarrassment. It is something that's looked down upon. It is something that is to take away your masculinity, versus like embracing, yes, but buck breaking, yeah. So versus embracing your femininity, you're always, if you embrace your femininity, you're automatically emasculated. And those things seem to be mutually exclusive, as in embracing one is nurturing the other. Actually, they don't see femininity as something of value, but to me, the Hotep community, the cishet man acts more feminine than they do masculine anyways. And all the things, like all the chaotic energy, all the aggression, that's not masculine energy. Masculine energy is usually cool, calm, collective, more submissive than not. Like, you're listening to the woman, you're acting after you think about things, you're actually trying to put pieces together, and then they're just like, no, and you're wrong, and this is why we and then it's just, but that's what you're working against. That's the same thing you're fighting against. It's the same thing you're like taking on. At the end of the day, I think they're all just getting low, and it just really hurts them. That's the conclusion. I think they're all getting low, and it hurts them really, really bad that they can't be themselves.
Well, first off, there's no individual gayer than the straight man. Just wanted to put that out there. And then to add on to that also is that the Hotep idea is not lost within the gay community as well. It's actually a lot more sick to witness when it's coming from a gay man. I have met many a Hotep gay man that it's almost like in their own way being an Uncle Tom, where it's like they're tap dancing just enough to get by with like straight Black men. So like,
can we backtrack? What do you mean, like, Hoteps within the gay community? I have never encountered.
I've met several gay Hoteps.
Yeah, I have met. There are gay Hoteps. Ring the bell. They're out there, and it is like the same. It's basically the same idea of like preserving like Blackness and preserving the Black state, but it's like there's a couple of exceptions. Like, there's like, if you can pass as like a cishet Black man, like, you're okay. And then it becomes like this whole idea where like they're on the other side because like they've passed the check, or like, they're not too gay enough to like be with us. But then they start to like, instead of punching up, they're punching down at like Black trans individuals or Black femmes, and they're saying like they're the reason we can't have liberation, instead of like turning it onto like white individuals, like, and which is like is technically the entire idea behind a Hotep, is understanding this like binary that has been the Black and white states. But instead of that, they're turning it onto their own community and like to like the feminine presenting individuals and saying that they're the sickness. And it's just like so sick to see that instead of uplifting the entire Black state, it's uplifting those that make the cut. And what is it? Why do we even have these cuts to like align with this group?
Something I'm curious about actually is when we talk about colorism and fat phobia within dating, I think we talk about it from like the Black straight male perspective, and I'm curious to know how those systems work within the queer community.
They suck. They suck. They I mean, yeah, I mean, it's weird to think about it, and like I actually didn't really come to terms with it up until like a couple weeks ago. It's really been something that's been causing me a lot of anxiety. Is like um, this whole thing that was like bugging me for so long, where it was like I know that what I identify as, and I know like when I go to bed, like I am comfortable with the being I am, but I don't feel like I am being welcomed in the same regards that some other individuals, or my white counterparts, or my wealthier counterparts, or wherever it may be, X, Y, and Z. Um, and it really came down to like first off me understanding like the fact that like colorism is a thing, and that a lot of the queer role models we do have, especially within media, like they are lighter skin. If not, they do some have bleached skin after getting to a certain level of fame. So that's already putting yourself down. And then like it's very weird to see how all those identities and all those issues take place within the queer community, because I would say that it goes back to the whole idea of intersectionality, whereas that it doesn't just add to who you are, but it multiplies the experience. And so we experience, someone who may be, Black and disabled, living from a lower income background, living in a rural community. Like those experiences only add on, and then if you add on maybe plus size, stuff like that. So it's just weird to see how all those just amplify even within like somewhat accepting spaces, or at least at face value accepting.
Fat phobia part, that's like super big, and I feel like that's something that's never addressed. I know in the gay male community, like they be fat phobic a lot and will never admit it, but it's like, yes, like that is true. All of y'all who go to the gym and then like work out only on the freaking never cardio, only with like only weights. I'm just like, yes, I know that you like this type of physique, but where is this type of desire coming from? Like a lot of it is not just like, oh, I like being fit. A lot of it stems from I have internalized fat phobia, and like I can't even imagine myself like having like gaining weight or having a different type of body. I feel like with lesbians, it's not to the same degree, but still, it's like fat phobia still exists. I know like with my like me and my friends, like my friend like me, like I feel like I'm plus size. I don't know, like stallion shit. Like I feel like that's my body type. So I feel like it's easier for me to navigate the world rather than my friends who are bigger than me, like do struggle with navigating the world, specifically even the gay scene. Like even though women are more like accepting, like people still have like everyone's brainwashed in some type of way, even though it might not be on the surface, but like that little voice at the back of your head is still a little voice at the back of your head. Like doesn't matter if you acknowledge it or like push it to the side, but it's still there. Colorism for sure, like I feel like that's super big, even with like lesbians. And like that's actually insane. Like people who, if you are like a lighter skinned feminine person, being like, oh, like you're like the trophy. But it's like, why does that even exist? Like I think that's just so problematic. Or if you are like darker skin and more feminine, it's like people struggle to like navigating that, or like they see you not even as feminine but still see you as like masculine, being like, oh, like I don't really know how to approach this person, like struggling, like, oh, like you're so intimidating, which is honestly just BS, because like it's just someone projecting how they feel about themselves onto you. I feel like these within the queer community, like there does need to be more dialogue about these things, or just honestly like a subconscious like checking, like if all your partners are like lighter skin, like maybe question like why is that a thing? Or if all your darkest partners are darker skin, do you have a fetish? Like question that too. Like question like both hands, because I feel like everyone does like who they like, but it's like if it becomes a pattern to the point where like you don't even approach someone if they're because of a certain skin tone or because of a certain weight, then that's telling something about you that you need to analyze for yourself.
And my next question for you all will be, What have you all learned about yourself through dating while Black and queer?
I mean, I'm a Black gay woman, so who am I? Who am I to judge anybody else? Especially anybody under the umbrella of the LGBTQ community. I don't know, like I'm not very like educated about the LGBTQ community, and I still have a lot of questions about it, but I definitely am not as judgmental, and I'm way more understanding of the struggle.
Like two folds. Like one is like the male gaze. I don't feel that on me. Like I remember, like in high school, I did think that I was straight, but now, like being gay, like going to a school that's like basically only women and trans people, like it becomes an environment that's just very empowering, where like you don't have to even think about like cis men, like walking outside without like a bra, no one cares because everyone has like basically the same thing you have. So it's not like, oh, I have to protect myself, or if I'm going to a party, I don't have to wear makeup or stuff like that. But I feel like being queer, it's like kind of like a I see you, like you don't have to put on a facade. There's like a type of breaking down of like the mask that we put out on for the outside world. But I feel like being queer, specifically around other queer Black people, it's like I see you, I understand you. Like a lot of things, like I don't even have to explain how I feel. It's just like a type of like aura around us. It's like I understand what you're going through. Another, on the flip side though, in high school I used to be like a lot of like, man, like niggas ain't shit, like whatever. But I feel like now I'm kind of like, that's like toxicity and like negative traits and trauma, like we all carry that. So even I feel like I used to push that a lot onto like cishet men, but now engaging in relationships, friendships, any type of like relationship with queer people, I'm like, oh, like yeah, like this person, we might share similar axes of identity, but like they can still be like a not good person. It's like that's okay, because like everyone, we all have our stuff to deal with. I should just generalize just like one population. Of course, with like cishet men, that is on a whole nother degree, but we still, everyone still has a type of relearning, specifically in your 20s, to go through, like relearning yourself and like decompartmentalizing like all like the trauma that you've dealt with.
All right, well, that's it for our episode. I want to thank all of you guys for being a part of this and part of this conversation. I also want to end this with saying that you cannot be pro-Black and simultaneously homophobic or transphobic. I think that's really important, that if you want liberation for Black people, it must be liberation for all Black people. And I kind of want to end on that note, just in case there's any trolls in the comments. And I love all of y'all, and thank you guys so much for being a part of this.